Welcome, wonderful people. This is Mr. Ndabezita, and this time we will be dealing with a tuple. And unfortunately, before we can go even to a tuple, I think it is important that we try to first deal with an array. Let's just have a brief summary of an array. Try to see the basic principles of how an array would work, and from there we will go into a tuple. So let me just wait for this to compile so that we can begin working on this. So I've been working on this system.transactions, so I'm going to get rid of all this. Right, and what I'm going to do, just underneath the main, I am going to declare a method. So the purpose of the method is to accept an array, and then once an array has been accepted, it should be able to calculate the minimum, the maximum, the minimum index where the the minimum index where the minimum number was found, and the index maximum where the maximum value was found. And we will add into this, we will calculate the sum, the average, the count, and other things. So what I'm going to do is to declare a method. The method will be public, the method will be static, it will return void, and I'm going to call this method calculations. Right, and the calculations method is going to accept some few arguments, and these arguments are as follows. So we would have the first one, it will be an integer array, and we just going to call this integer array numbers. And then secondly, we are going to have an out parameter, two of them, that would be able to return for us, or that would be able to print out for us, and the index where the minimum and the maximum values were found. So it will be an out parameter of type int, and I'm going to call it the index maximum out int index minimum. Very good. So in other words, the method accepts in three arguments, an array and two out parameters. Very good. And we can just come here and tag, somebody can say end calculations, and that would be very much fun. So this is just a method that we have. Okay, let me just bring this laptop just like this so that I can work freely in this. So what I'm going to do, as we hover over here, we are being told, let me just stand in here, and there's a pop-up message that says the out parameter index max and the index min must be assigned to before control leaves the current method, and that's exactly what I will do. But before I can even do that, let me just have some containers, because I have to find a container where I can be able to store in the maximum value and the minimum value. Right, so because my array will be of type integer, so I'm going to declare container of type integer. So I'm going to say int maximum value, and I'm going to say this is equals to the numbers. So I'm saying go inside of my array of numbers, stand at position 0, take that number and make that number the maximum value. So the container of type int called maximum value has a value at that specific index, at index 0. That number may be 20, 30 or -3 or whatever. And I'm also going to press the tab there. and I'm also going to use 0 there to say, okay, I'm having a second container that is called minimum value, and this minimum value, I'm saying it is equals to whatever number that you find inside of your array at index 0. So for example, let me come here and say, for example, I have an array of numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So in here, what I'm saying is go inside of this, stand at position 0, take that number and make that number the maximum and also the minimum. That's exactly what I'm trying to do there. But you will see how this works out. So secondly, now that I have these containers, there are some containers that I need. I need containers that would be able to store for me the maximum, the minimum index. Let me just deal with these ones first. So I can say index max, it's not equals to that. So remember this one, this container has to give me the position where that number was found. In our example in here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the index maximum has to tell me where did you find that maximum value inside of your array. So the maximum index in here, the maximum number, it's at index 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So it has to return for me an index of 4. That is where the maximum number was found. So please understand it in that way. So I'm not going to say this is equals to this. I'm not going to say this. Why? Because when I say this, I'm saying go at position 0 in my array, take that number at position 0 and make it that maximum. I don't want to do that. I want to store in the position. So because remember this array, I need to have a loop that would be able to loop through every number inside of your array and be able to tell me the location. So for now, because I don't have a for loop that will run inside of this, I'm going to say index maximum is equals to 0. Very important. And I'm also going to say the index min is also equals to 0. This is exactly what I'm going to say there. Very, very important. And as you can see, immediately when you assign your out parameters some values, the error just disappears. Something worthy of noting. And one thing worthy of noting is that using out parameters, can you see that we are able to return multiple numbers? You're going to see this just in a few seconds. Right, let's continue. Now I have a container for the maximum, for the minimum, for index max and the index min. Now I need a container for the sum, the average and the count. So I can have an int. In fact, I can come here and I can say sum it's equals to 0, because obviously if you are having an array of integers, the sum will be an integer. So I'm going to have this sum which is equals to 0, and I'm also going to take the count as being equals to 0. So what is the duty of the count? The count will be able to tell me how many elements are inside of your array. That is why I need this count, and it's going to play a pivotal role when I calculate the average, because the average is the sum divided by the total number of elements inside of your array. So that is why I need this count. And then the last one, it's the average. I'm not going to make an average an int, because an average might be a double. So just to run not into any risk, I'm going to say double average. And for now, because I haven't added every element that is inside of my array, I'm just going to say the average is also equals to 0. So can you see how many zeros we have in here? And do you understand why I'm having these zeros? This is the aim of the lectures of Papa Fanzo. Right. Now that I have a container for storing everything, now I can loop through inside this. I'm not going to use a for each because I cannot stand at every position and add to that using a for each. The simple loop to use for this is a for loop. Right. So you have the for as the reserved keyword. You must have those curved brackets, and then you can do the following in here. Inside here you can declare a variable of type int, which you can call an index, and when you say is equals to 0, you are simply saying start at position 0, because that's how numbering transpires in Visual Studio C#. If you have an array of numbers, this number is at index 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm saying start at index 0. Okay, so it will start at index 0. Very good. You must terminate with a semicolon there. And if, because the index is 0, and then you are saying now check is 0, because index currently has a value of 0, you are saying is 0 less than the numbers inside of your array. Remember, you are going to pass this array dot length. So what does the dot length do? The dot length returns or tells you how many elements are inside of your array. So as you can see, it's a property that gets the total number of elements in all the dimensions of an array. So if you have 5 numbers, the length is 5. So you are saying start at index 0. Now it will check here. This is a test. Is 0 less than 5? Yes, that is true. If that is true, go to the second number. So I'm going to say index plus plus. Index plus plus. What does the plus plus do? I'm saying, okay, if the index is less, which is currently 0, is 0 less than the length, the numbers dot length, that length of the array. If the length maybe it's 5, is 0 less than 5? Yes. Therefore index plus plus, I'm saying increment this index by 1. So when it comes for the second time, the index is no longer 0 but 1, because you have incremented the value of the index by 1. So when it comes for the second comparison, the index is no longer 0 but 1. Therefore it will check again, is 1 less than 5? Yes. It will go inside and increment and so on. I'm trying to be very slow so that you understand this. Remember, this is a revision. So let me just do the following. Let me come here and say end 4, so that we don't lose a track of what we are doing. And it is also very important that as the professor speaks, there is something to drink. Right. So I'm having this for loop. What is it that I want to do inside here? The for loop has the capability of returning for me the maximum number, the minimum number, the index where the maximum was found, the index where the minimum was found. It is able to return for me the sum. It is able to return for me the count. All those things are possible to be done with a for loop. And let's just see how. So now remember, I need to run through every element inside of my array. So what is going to happen in here? I'm going to say the following. I'm going to say, okay, stand at the first position, take that number and compare that number with the second number. If the first number is less than the second number, make the first number the maximum. And how do I do that? So I'm going to say if. So I'm running a check here. I'm going to say if now if a number inside of my array at a specific index, at a specific position 0, 1, 2, if you are at position 0 and you find a number and that number, let me press the tab, it's greater than the maximum, which is what? Remember, the maximum in this case, it's a number inside of my array at position 0. So I'm saying as you are running through, so what it will do in here, it will stand at position 0 because that's where it will start. It will say there's a number at position 0. Let's say that number is 3. It will say, is 3 greater than 3? No. So it cannot take 3 and make that the maximum, because currently I will be having that number 3 as the maximum. It will not do that, right? And then remember, it has to loop through. It will take that number 3 and make that number the maximum value. It will go to the second number. If the second number is 7, it will say it's 7 bigger than, sorry, it's yes, it will say it's 7 bigger than 3. Yes, therefore it will take 7 and now make 7 the maximum. And then secondly, it will go and check. Maybe it comes across 20. It will say, is 20 greater than 7? Yes, therefore it will take 20 and make that the maximum. So at the end of the day, you will get the maximum value. So what I'm saying is, okay, if you are standing at a particular element and you find that element to be the maximum via this, take that maximum number and store that number as the maximum. So inside of this container maximum, inside of your array, it now has, or it has now stored in a maximum number inside of this variable. I think this is something that needs you to sit down and try to think about it very thoroughly. So now I have the maximum, and I can also find the position where that maximum was found. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to say index maximum. So I'm going to say index maximum. It's now equals to the index. It is now equals to the position where that maximum was found. So I'm saying where you found that maximum, take the index where it was located, index 1, 2, 3, or 4. Take that index and store that index inside of this index maximum. So the index maximum has the position where the maximum number was found. That position can be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. Very, very important. So I now have two things. But remember, it's not only the maximum that I need, I also need the minimum. Therefore, I'm going to run the second if. So I'm going to say if, and I'm going to say again, go inside of numbers, stand at a particular index, and if you find that number at that index to be less than the minimum value, and then I'm saying take that number, minimum value, it's equals to the number that you found at that position. This is exactly what I'm saying. So I'm saying, okay, go inside if the numbers at a particular index inside of your array, because currently I am having a minimum value at index 0. If at index 0 I'm having a value of 3, and it will check, is 3 less than 3? No. Therefore, it will not make that the minimum. It will go to the second number. It will check, maybe the second number is 7. It will say, is 7 less than 3? Yes. Therefore, it will take that 3 and make that the minimum. And remember, it will have to compare for every element. So at the end of the day, it will be able to tell you what the minimum number is as it runs through every number inside of your array. Right, so just a simple demonstration for what I'm trying to say is the following. right? It will go in here and it will check. It will, if remember, we are looking for the minimum here. It will check, is 1 less than 1? No, therefore 1 is not the minimum, because remember, it is having that number at the beginning at index 0. And then it will go to the second one. It will say, is 2 less than 1? Yes, therefore it will take 1 and make it the minimum. But when it gets here, it will say, is 1 less than, it will say minus 1 less than 1? Yes, therefore it will take minus 1 and make minus 1 the minimum. Right, now that I have the minimum, it should be very easy to find the index where that minimum was found. And I'm just going to say minimum index is equals the position where that minimum number was found. And we are done. We have the maximum, the index max, the minimum, and the index min, and we are very much done. Now we need to do some calculations. Now I need to increment the count. So the count tells me how many times did the loop run. It has to run 3 times if you have 3 elements in your array, 5 times if you have 5, and so on. So I'm going to come here and increment the count by 1. So every time it runs the loop for the first time, it will increment and make count 1. For the second time, 2, 3, and so on and so on. Very, very important. I'm not putting this inside of the if. I'm putting this inside of the for, because it has to run inside the for loop. Very good. And then once that is done, now that I have the count, I think I can find the sum. I can say sum plus it's equals to the numbers at every index. This is exactly what I can do. So what am I doing here? I'm saying whenever you are inside of the array and you are standing at a particular position, take that number and store that inside of the sum. So it will keep on adding to the sum. So this is the same as saying sum equals sum plus 1. So there are different ways of achieving that. You can say sum is equals to sum plus 1. So what are you doing? You are adding to the sum. Or you can say sum plus is equals to 1. This would do, these 3 things does exactly the same thing. Oh no, sorry, sum plus equals let me do this. Sum equals numbers at every index. I'm very, very sorry. Yes, you can do this. So you are adding to the sum. So let me just say sum plus. So you are adding every time to the sum. You can do it in this way, or you can do it in this way. You can say sum plus equals numbers at every index. This is another way in which you can do this, but I've already shown that in there. So these, let me see if there's another way. Yes, you can do it in this way, or you can do it in that way. So let me just get rid of this one. So the choice is yours how you want to do this. So now that I have the sum and now that I have the count, I can calculate the average. So I can say the average is equals to the sum divided by the count, because that's how we calculate the average. We take in the sum of the numbers divided by the total number of elements that are inside of your array, and remember, the count is responsible for that. So I think everything it's very fine for us. So I can exit the for loop in order to do some print out. So I'm going to use a code snippet console.writeLine, and I'm just going, CW is a code snippet, and when I press enter, it should be able to do that for us. It seems like it is refusing to do that. I don't know why, but it should do that. And if it still persists not doing that, I might as well just code it. Console dot write line. So in this write line, what I'm going to do is the following. So I'm going to say, and I'm going to be very brief, I'm going to use interpolation. And let me do the following. I'm going to do the following. Let me start first with the count. So I'm going to do the following. I'm going to say there are let me just have a count. There it is. There are 5 elements in your array. That's the first thing. And I'm also going to say console dot write line. And secondly, let me just copy this. Sorry, let me just wait for Visual Studio to respond. There it is. Let me just copy this. Let me just paste. Very good. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to say the following. I'm going to say okay, I'm going to say okay, sum, and I'm going to print out the sum, and I'm going to have a new line, escape character, and I'm going to say average, and I'm going to have the average in there, and I'm going to say remember the max value, and it will bring me the max value there. Escape character again, the minimum value, and it will bring for me the minimum value there, and I think I'll be fine. 1 2 3 4 5. So I think I'm very much fine with this. I'm very much fine. And then once that it's done, I think I can go into the main. So I'm going to come here, but let me just do the following. Let me just okay, let me not do that. Let me just come in here and let me call in this method. So I'm going to say calculations, right? But I know that I need to pass in an array inside there. So the first thing that I'm going to do is to declare an array of type integers, and I'm going to call this array an array of numbers, and this is equals to new int, and let me pass in some values there. these are the values that I have inside of my array. Let's count how many values are there. 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10 11 12. So we have 12 values. So let me pass in an array of numbers. Very good. And then secondly, an out int. You need to use exactly the same name in there. So index max out int index min, right? And then we should be very fine to go, right? And then secondly, what I'm going to do there, I'm going to have a console.writeLine, a code snippet. Doesn't want to do that, that's fine. Console.writeLine, and the first thing that I'm going to do there, I'm just going to draw up a line. Let's just draw up a line, and then let's have another console.writeLine using interpolation, and I'm going to say in here the value in fact, let me say the maximum value was found at index, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to say index, you see it's available, index max. So this would return for me the index where the maximum value was found. And then secondly, I'm going to just copy this and paste, and I'm going to say the minimum index minimum. So it will just say the minimum value was found at that particular index, and we should be very much well to go. So let's see if everything will run the way in which we want. So I'm going to press Ctrl and F5 just to see if things are happening the way in which they should, and we will just verify this to check whether our findings are consistent with the data that we have. So I want to bring this in here. Very good. So let's just wait. Let's just wait for it to compile, guys. It's taking a little bit of time, but I can assure you it will be done just in a sec. Okay, this is longer than I have expected. Okay, let me close this. Let me pause the video and we will come back when it is done. Right, I think it is now done. Let's just wait for it to populate us with the data. So there it is. There are 12 elements in your array, so this is correct. We have counted. The sum is this. That's fine. It seems like it has added all these numbers. Let me see this. So this is alright, guys. Sorry, Camtasia just crashed, so it took me some time to recover the files. That's because I'm using a problematic machine, but everything is fine now. Let us look into this. Remember, we were in here trying to verify some few things. So we have an output, and we have 12 elements inside of our array. That is very true. The sum is this is the average, the maximum is that, and that makes a lot of sense. That should be the maximum, and that should be the minimum. So the code works just fine. The maximum value was found at index 10. So let's check that. 0 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10. Very good. And the minimum was found at index 11, and the code works just fine. So this is just a brief revision of how an array works, or what you can do with an array, and this is fine. Now let's go and look at what we should look at, which is a tuple. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to comment all this code, but because I don't need this code for myself or for anybody, I'm just going to get rid of this method. I don't need this. I honestly do not need it. So I'm going to get rid of all this. Very good. And I'm going to work with a tuple. But before we can work with a tuple, I think we should just have some reading here on my tablet, just to tell us what a tuple is all about. Right. It says there are numerous techniques for returning multiple values from a function. We've just seen one where we used the out keyword the way it was not designed to be used. This is very important. Right, to return multiple values, you can use the out keyword. You can also use a struct, or you can use an array, and so on. But using the out keyword would achieve the goal of returning multiple values from a function, and we have just done that, of course. Okay, that is also fine. Remember that the out keyword is intended for passing a parameter by reference without needing to initialize it first, and that's not what we did. Remember, we had to initialize an out parameter, and this is not the way it was intended to be used, but we used it in that way so that we can fulfill whatever that we wanted. And you can go and check my tutorials how to use an out parameter in the way in which it was intended. Very good. So I have a lecture which is called out parameters, and you can go and look into that. Right, okay, that's fine. A tuple, on the other hand, it's a very eloquent approach for achieving this objective with little overhead. And I want to show you this. I want to show you how we can achieve whatever that we have been doing in this lecture by just using a tuple. And you can see how minimum our code would be, because the tuple provides a very convenient and direct approach to return more than a single value from a function. This is exactly what we want to do. It's most useful when a program doesn't need a struct or more complicated implementations. Right, so let us look at this. Let us try to look at exactly what a tuple could do. So I can come in here and I can say, I want to show you the problem. You can have an integer called numbers, and you can assign it a value of a tuple. Yes, you can say, okay, 1 2 3 4 5, and you can close this. Right, and when you stand in here, it will say these are fields, but there is a problem in here, because this is a tuple This is how a tuple looks like. You using those curved brackets, you have elements inside them, you infer, you have a type, you have a name, and this is a tuple. But when you specifically say, even though the elements inside of here are all of type int, you cannot say this is an int. You have to allow the compiler to infer the type for you by using the var keyword. So immediately when you stand in here, it says represents a value tuple, you see, with 5 components. And how can I access these components? Okay, I can just say console dot write line, and I can just say numbers dot and when I press the dot, let's see what we can have access to. Right, so the items inside of your tuple are item 1, item 2, item 3, item 4, and item 5. So let's see whether we will be able to output the first element inside of your tuple. This is not an array, it's a tuple. Right, let's run this. And one thing worthy of noting, I don't have to use a for loop here in order to loop through inside of a tuple and be able to output every element at every index. I don't have to do that. One advantage of using a tuple. Right, let's see how this works. Let's just give this a few minutes and it will be done just in a sec. So in the meantime, it is still trying to load. The value at position 1, it's called item 1, item 2, 3, 4, and 5. So I don't know why it's taking this long, but that's exactly what is happening. So I can also have another console dot write line, and I can also go inside of numbers dot item 1 plus I can add these numbers dot item 2, and it will add the first 2 elements inside of your tuple. Right, let's just wait, guys. I think it will run just in a few minutes. I'm not using an i3, i4, i5, i7, or i9. It's just a normal Acer laptop, so it is very slow. Even if you can try to increase the memory, unfortunately it does exactly that. So the element at position 1, item 1, it's 1, and it was able to print that for us. Let's see the second one. Let's just run this very quickly and check. And here we are, and what it will do, it will take the first element and add it to the second element and be able to return this. So this is one example of what we call a tuple. And as you can see that when you press the dot in here, every element inside of your tuple at index 1, you have item 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this references to every element inside of your tuple. Right. Okay, that is fine. That is very much fine. So secondly, what is it that we can do? So secondly, for example, you can name or you can specify your tuples by name. So what we mean by that is that you can do the following. This is a tuple. You can say int num1, int num2, and you can give them a name. Just say maybe it's num. This would be the name, and you can equate this, and then what you can do in there is to say, okay, I want to give them some names. So you can say this is equals, and you can assign them values. You can say maybe 56 and 67. So it will know automatically that num1 it's 56 and num2 it's 67. So you can name your tuple in this way, and you can just have a console write line. It doesn't still work, that's fine. Write line, and what you can do there, you can say num dot, and because now you have named them, it's no longer saying item 1 or item 2. It now uses the names num1 and num2. So I can add num1 and num2, and I can get the result. So it will be able to go inside of your tuple. So it looks very much similar with an array, but with minimum effort. Exactly. Now, this is not what I wanted us to do. In fact, I just wanted to give you just a brief summary of how a tuple looks like. But we're not going to do this. We're going to do how to find the maximum, the minimum value, how to find the sum, the average, and the count using a tuple, just to simplify that lengthy coding that we had. So I'm going to declare a method that is going to be private, because the main it's inside of this class, so I will have access to this method. So the method would be private, it would be static. And what is this method? It's a tuple. Very important. I want to show you here as we stand in here. Okay, it has to tell you that it is a tuple. So all right, that is fine. So I'm going to say, okay, the first element it's int, and this is a max. Secondly, I'm going to have an int which is a minimum, and then I'm going to have a double that is an average. Remember, I'm naming my tuple, and I want an int that would be the sum, and I want an int that would also be the count. And should there be anything else, I will try to do that. So secondly, what is it that I need to do is to provide my tuple with a name. So let's call this tuple that we have with a name, and let's a get calculations, right? And then in here, the first thing that I'm going to do there, these calculations, I'm going to use an interface. And this interface, it's an I enumerable. And the I enumerable in there, I'm going to specify an int. And as you can see there, it says it's a generic. It's a generic there, because immediately when you have angled bracket, that is a generic. So I'm passing in an interface there. So because as we stand in here, this is an interface. It exposes the enumerator, which supports a simple iteration over a collection of specified type. T, the type of the object to enumerate. Very good. So I'm going to give this a name, and I'm going to say these are numbers. Very good. And from there, what is it that I'm going to do? Now I'm going to return, and what is my returning there? So what I'm going to return, it's an enumerable And this enumerable, when you press the dot there, we have many things. We can have the maximum. It will return the maximum number inside of your array, and this array, it's remember, I'm going to specify the type there. It's going to be of type int, but it's going to be an array that is called numbers. It's enumerable. It's a generic. It's of specified type int, but it will be an integer array called numbers. So I'm going to pass in numbers there. Now remember what it will do. It will go inside of your array of integer values and it will find the maximum. Right. Secondly, I'm going to say enumerable, and I'm going to use the dot, and I'm going to say a dot minimum, and it should be able to do that for us. And I'm going to pass in here an array of numbers, but there seems to be some problem in our coding there. Oh, there seems to be some problem. So I have my enumerable, which is of type int, and I'm calling that numbers. So why is it doing this? Numbers cannot implicitly convert type int to int max and so on. So there's a problem. There is a problem. Let me do this. Let me check where my method no. So in here everything seems to be very fine. Let me check where the problem is. So I have given it a name, get max, and I'm having my enumerable of type int called numbers. So why is it doing this? And I'm passing in the numbers there. Okay, let's continue in this. And this accepts that, and I don't know why we are having this problem. And I'm going to say, oh, there it is, enumerable dot. And now remember, I have the max, I have the min, I need to have the average, because it has to be in that order there. And I'm going to pass in numbers, and when I'm done, I'm going to say enumerable dot, and I'm going to say the average, it's done. I'm going to say the sum, and I'm going to pass in the numbers there. Okay, so let me just close this. Let's go a little bit higher. What else is left? The count. So I'm going to say enumerable dot count. Very good. And I'm going to pass in numbers there. Right, let me just stand in here and close this. Now let's see if things are working just fine. Yes, it is able to return 1 2 3 4 5 things for us. Do you see? Just in one line of code we can have all those things returned for us. This is the beauty of using a tuple. And now let's try to implement this inside of our namespace. So the first thing that you will do, you will say I enumerable, and you will specify it's of type int. Give it a name. I'm going to say numbers, and I'm going to say this is equals to new int of what? Of array of numbers. So I'm going to say negative this, positive that, 0, negative this, negative that, this, and that. And this would be my array of integers. This is exactly what I have. How many elements? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Let me just have 10. Very good. So how am I accessing those elements? It's another question of interest. So I'm going to declare a variable, and I'm going to use the var keyword, and I'm going to call this result, and I'm going to equate this to get calculations. And what is it that I need to pass in there? Remember, this is very, very important. Right, I'm going to be very brief, very, very brief. I'm going to use the interpolation, and I'm just going to say, you see what it is looking for? Very important. Maximum, min, average, sum, and count in that order. So I'm going to say max, and when I am at the max there, I think the following would transpire. Let me just do this very quickly, guys, and I will be back. Right, okay. Let me specify in there, and what I'm going to specify is the following. And let me just do the following. So I'm going to say result, sorry, I'm going to say result dot, and I'm going to say max. Very good. So let me just do this very, very quickly. Sorry. I'm going to say the following. Okay, I'm saying result dot max. Go to a new line, and I'm going to say the minimum, and I'm going to say result dot min. Okay, but there seems to be a problem when we do that. Why? Because I didn't pass in the numbers. So let me just do the following. Let me pass in an array of numbers in there. Let me just do this. I am passing in an array of numbers, and then once I have passed in the array of numbers, then I can be able to print out whatsoever that I want to print. So I can have a console dot write line, and I'm going to be very specific as to say max, and it will be able to print out for me result. Remember, inside of result, that's where I have my array dot, and I'm going to say max. Move to a new line, and I'm going to say min, and I'm going to say result dot main, and I'm going to say average, and I'm going to say result dot average, new line, I'm going to say sum, and find the result dot sum, and I'm also going to say okay, the last one is count, so I'm going to say count, and I'm going to say result dot count, and it will be able to return all those things for me just in one single line. And let's run this and check. Let's just try to run this and check. Let's see if things will do exactly what we want. And then in order to find the position where the minimum and the maximum were found, you can just use a for loop, and then you will be able to find those positions where the minimum and the maximum were found, and then after doing that you will be done. So let's just wait for this to run and see exactly what we can get from that. So let me just do this. So here we are, and we have the maximum, that is the number, the minimum, the average, the sum, and the count. So in here I think I forgot to do a line. So that, guys, will bring us to the end of our lecture for today. I hope you have enjoyed, I hope you have understood, and I will see you in the next tutorial.